Hello everyone, welcome to chess opening lessons. Today we'll be talking about one of the chess openings which is called giuco pianissimo. We'll be learning the move order and why we're playing each of those moves from white's and black's perspective. And finally we'll be talking about one or two of the candidate moves that we do not consider while getting into the position of giuco pianissimo. That is, we'd be saying why other moves are better than some of the pawn moves that we could make and that would not take us in the opening that we're studying today. So giuco pianissimo can be reached, interestingly, by two different openings that have different names, and we'll be talking about them. First, we'll be talking about the common way to get into the giuco pianissimo, which is called the opening, which is giuco piano. So white starts with e4, then black tries to play a similar move, which is e5, then knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, bishop c5, and this opening is called giuco piano. And then white plays d3 and knight c6, and this opening is called giuco pianissimo. The second way in which we can arrive at the same position, and that would be our opening of our today as well, is by playing e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4. Now, instead of the bishop over here that we played in our previous opening choice, if we play knight to c6, this is called the two knights defense, then white can play d3, and if black plays bishop c5, we reach giuco pianissimo as well. So there are two of the ways in which we can reach giuco pianissimo. It's a very solid opening, very popular across all levels of chess games. And now we'll be talking about why we are choosing these move orders in our opening. And later on we'll be talking about some of the moves that we should not play because there are other better moves at that position. When white starts with e4, white tries to control the center with this pawn move. This means that with this pawn move, white is trying to control the d5 square and the f5 square, so that any of the undefended pieces or any of the pawns, if they get there, white can be able to capture the pawn or the piece, so they would be a piece up. Black tries to do the same thing, so whenever white is trying to control the center with a pawn move like this, black is trying to do the same thing in this opening by pushing the pawn to e5. With this move, black is also trying to do a similar thing, but with a different different squares over here. As we can see that black is trying to control these two squares, so these are the moves that control the center. So next, white plays a developing move, and that developing move is knight to f3. All this move does is it tries to develop one of the minor pieces of white, and this white piece is also attacking the pawn that has just been pushed to e5. In response, black also tries to play a developing move, which is knight to c6, and this also serves the purpose of defending the pawn over here. Now, if we look at the chessboard, we'd see that there are a lot of moves that we can play. We can develop our knight over here, we can actually push our pawn over here, or we can push it all the way up to here. But the move that white is choosing in giuco pianissimo, if we want to analyze why we're playing this, is that whenever you get a chance to develop one of your pieces and there is no tension at the center, then it is much better to do that. And that's why putting the bishop over here or putting the bishop over here are much more preferred than any of the pawn moves that we could see over here. And we can definitely develop our knight, but that would take us to a different opening, And since we're learning giuco pianissimo today, this is one of our opening choices. With this, we reach to a position where black has the choice of making this game a 2 knights defense if he plays this and attack this pawn over here, or he can develop the bishop over here, and that's how we reach the opening, which is called giuco piano. We would later on see that this move is slightly better than the other bishop move, because whenever you have a chance to develop your knight versus the bishop, it is a common practice, but it is not a written rule somewhere that you should develop the knight, but it is common practice to develop knights before bishop. So once this knight is trying to attack this pawn over here, one of the ways in which you can defend this pawn is by pushing this over here. Why would we choose this move over any other move? Like, we can also develop our knight over here and protect this, because in giuco pianissimo what happens is that the knight does not get developed in here. It rather gets developed in this square that we would see later in any of our other chess classes. That's why it is so, and that is why making this pawn push is much more important. And we would see that this pawn push that we are having over here allows this bishop to get developed over this long diagonal at any places later on. So to wrap things up, now we would be talking about what moves we would be making to make sure it's a giuco pianissimo. So I'll be trying to remove all the arrows over here and rerun the same things over and over again. White plays e4, black plays e5, white plays knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4. There are two choices that you can make that can take us to the same opening, one of which is knight f6, and the other is bishop c5. We'd at first see knight f6, then we would try to defend this pawn with d3, and then bishop c5. The other way we would reach the same position is when we develop bishop c5, and then d3, and then knight f6. Once more for our practice: e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, knight f6, d3, bishop c5. The other order: e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, bishop c5, d3, knight f6. You can pause the video at any time of your comfort and practice these move orders to get to giuco pianissimo. And happy chess playing!